Okay, a common question we get is how do I list my middle school math on a high school transcript? So, last couple of videos we've been talking about dealing with things like seventh and eighth, maybe even sixth grade mathematics, and oftentimes students will be starting in Algebra 1. They might even finish Algebra 1 early, and the fact that we want to put these on the right transcript. So if your homeschooler took algebra or geometry before the technical high school years, then we want to talk about how you get that listed on the transcript. So why this matters? First of all, many homeschoolers do take that. They take high school level courses earlier in the middle school. And I talked before in one of the previous videos that will be linked down below. There's a lot of reasons for doing that. Sometimes it's just scheduling is easier. But as we get into high school, things get busier and busier for the typical family. And for your high schoolers, get really busy. And having some of this stuff done ahead of time that's a lot of people consider it a plus, especially if you're college bound. So, and in colleges don't care. I mean, we don't care at the university. What we want is we want somebody who is qualified to take a course and is going to come in the course and pass it. And we are graded at the university level, and by graded I mean funded. But there is some grades about our success rate. Right, if a university who does not, who has a lot of failure, a lot of dropouts, things like that, that's not good for us. It looks bad for us, and it has some financial ramifications. So that's what we're looking for. Do you understand the material? Can you come in? Can you do the work? And do we care whether you took it in seventh grade or whatever, if you're some kind of boy or girl genius and you took it in the fourth grade, what do we care? I mean, you can do the work, right? Now, state rules may vary slightly, or cover school rules, or maybe even local requirements might have some restrictions, especially for those of us that are in areas that have very restrictive regulations on this. So, but what we're going to talk about is some of these options. How do you deal with the transcript? And so I'm going to walk you through a couple of the options, and I'm going to just talk through this. We're going to put a link in the blog post that will be linked down below, right down there at the bottom of this. And we'll put either that or maybe you're seeing this in the blog post, but the link, these descriptions will be on there. So first, we start with number one. What is the most typical is that if somebody, and I'm going to use algebra because that's where we typically see this, is what they're going to do is list algebra as ninth grade. And it doesn't matter if I'm on the seventh grade. So I'm going to treat it as if it were taken in the freshman year. And this is the simplest method to do it. And again, we see this most typically as an issue for the math and maybe some of the English and the hard requirements on a transcript. Your state, city, county, but usually your state requirements, cover school requirements, and maybe university requirements. So the algebra is one that you've got to get in there. So if I take it early, I'm typically going to list it. Option one, put it as ninth grade. Option two, though, is I might list it in a separate high school credit earned in middle school section. And sometimes we create these. So some parents want to show this was taken in seventh grade, and an example, it may say Algebra 1 credit earned in the seventh grade. And so they'll give a detail there, which gives whoever is viewing this that they got the credit for this ninth grade course earlier. Depends on what you're trying to communicate and who you're trying to communicate to. Option three, if your cover and or your state requires a subject plus a grade list, you might say mathematics. Oftentimes they'll say under math, Algebra 1, high school credit earned, grade A, or whatever grade was earned. And then you would list all the rest of your seventh grade. For instance, if you have to turn in a transcript or a detail courses taken during the seventh grade, that's what you might do is Algebra 1 for high school credit. Make a note of that. So back in the seventh grade, and many people do have to because of cover school. That's probably the most common. Some cover schools are very restrictive and they want you to give a lot of detail about what was taken. Option 4, if they require detailed course descriptions. We do find this sometimes that cover schools state you will require it. Then it would just be Algebra 1 high school credit, and then you would cover. The best thing to do is look for the course description of whoever publishes the course. Covers solving linear equations, graphing polynomials, with a textbook by such and such. Under a course video course taught by whoever. Sometimes they require that in the detail, but that one's easy because you probably already have the detail. The one that we don't see very often is option 5, if they require both middle school and high school transcripts. And again, this would be generally a cover school or a state requirement. And so under the middle school transcript, and I'm going to assume Johnny's in 7th grade, we're going to say Algebra 1 in the 7th grade, okay, because they require it. And then on the high school transcript, what we might show is Algebra 1 in the high school list with a note saying the credit was earned in the 7th grade. In other words, I'm going to list it twice, but put in the high school, they got the credit back in the 7th grade. You're fulfilling the requirement that they want to have in there in the 9th through 12th transcript, but if they want to know exactly when it was taken. And so that's a couple of ways that you want to do that. And so the spirit of this is really, who are you communicating to? What are your requirements? And you just try to communicate what actually happened the best that you can and what's needed. And if you can say the least that's needed, I mean, if you don't need a lot of detail, then why bother? And usually the detail is not the college. We don't care. If you told us you took Algebra 1 and it was in your 9th grade position or as a 9th grade course, and you took it in the 4th grade, we don't care. You took it, you passed, you're good. So this is usually when you get to state and or cover school requirements. And when I have seen this happen, talking to the person that's the head of the cover school and saying, hey, they took this early, but I want it to show up on the 9th grade properly. What's the way to do that? Because you're probably not the first one that's done this. So there's a couple of options. There's 5 different options. Again, we will put the link in the blog post about that. How many credits your course should count for? And the rule here is if it took you a whole year to do it, which is 2 semesters, it counts for 1 credit. So if you did it, if you take a course that is designed, let me change the wording of that. If the course is designed to be a 1 semester course, like some courses are, like maybe you're doing some equestrian science or something, and it was only designed to be for 1 semester, then it's half of a credit. So the algebra course, like if you did our algebra course or our geometry course or any of our courses, they are designed and built for 1 whole credit. They are designed assuming you're going to do this over the whole year or over the 2 semesters. But if you finish them early, let's say you start algebra in August and you finish it in December, that looks like half a credit, but you did a whole credit's worth of work, so it counts for 1 credit. That's the way we look at that. A lot of students do get ahead by doing that. We see a lot of students that will do, not a lot, we will see many students though that, maybe you can change that. We'll see some students that take algebra and they do it in one semester, and then geometry, and they do it in another semester. So they got basically 2 credits for math in that 1 year. So, and that's what the transcript is looking for. And if you go down and you watch, we will have a link. Let's see if I have that here correctly. There is a video on the transcript, how the transcript is done, how to build your homeschool transcript video. We even have some downloadable links about the transcript and that you can get. That's where we would do that. We will show you exactly how that fits in there and the 1 credit. So let me stop for just a minute and just say let me kind of flip the gears or flip the lens, and let's assume, what are the colleges looking for on your transcript? What are they looking at? And we talk about this on the transcript video also, but they are only looking at 9th through 12th grade, 9th grade through 12th grade. They don't care. Anything else, they don't care. It's not a fit for them to make a judgment on that. They typically were going to accept credits earned earlier. And you're going to find the universities fairly forgiving, because as long as you meet the minimum requirements, anything above and beyond or taken early doesn't really matter. That's easy. Right, it's not meeting the minimum requirements. It's usually the gotcha. And let's be frank, we care probably more about the ACT and SAT scores for most degrees. Now, there are exceptions of programs or universities that will do some more detailed stuff, but that's generally what we're looking for. So, for example, if your student took Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, like we've been talking about, but they listed in the 9th grade, that's fine. We're just not down into that detail. We don't care about what you were doing there. We just care that you're ready. High school transcripts generally only include courses for which the student is receiving high school credit. Meaning, if you got all the credits you need, you got all the maths, you got all the science, you got all the required stuff that you need, and you got all the things that you need for the university, and you got extra credits, maybe because you did something volunteer, you got equestrian science or something like that, something just for fun, but it became a school credit, then does that show up on the transcript? It may or may not, depending on what you're trying to communicate. Right? If you're trying to say my student was active in doing things, sure, then you want to include it. But they just don't, they're not going to look at that. They don't really care for that for most things. When you start looking at scholarships, when you start looking at communicating, extracurricular activities and things like that for scholarships, it might show up then, but then you're probably also submitting other material and not just a transcript. So, but what we're talking about in the transcript is what it takes to get accepted. And a lot of people don't even put that stuff. So it would have gone in your high school credit records for your cover school, your state, but it may not show up on your transcript. Many transcripts, many homeschoolers, many public and private schoolers who list early taken high school level courses, like we're talking about here today, and they put them in the transcript in the later year. Even you'll see that in the public and the private schools, right? Because if Johnny or Susie takes Algebra 1 in 7th grade in a public school system, which that does happen, they will put it on your transcript in the 9th grade. And they'll note it however they need to note it, because they are packaging it for the typical university model. And by the way, colleges don't require, somebody was asking me the other day, they don't require that you took Algebra 1 during the 9th grade or geometry during the 10th grade. As a matter of fact, different school systems might call it something besides algebra and geometry. I remember seeing a school system that called something analytics, which was essentially geometry, if I remember. They just had a weird name for it. So now that's not recommended, but that's the way they might do things. So again, at the university, all we're really caring about is, are you moving up into math? Have you got the minimum requirements? For most universities, algebra is a minimum requirement. Some of them it's going to be the geometry and the algebra 2. Generally speaking, the more math you have, the better off you are to take the ACT and such as that. All right. So let me throw out a couple of caveats, a couple of cases where this may not be the case. Everything I'm talking about is showing what you took in middle school, putting it on your high school 9th through 12th transcript. When might that not work? And there's a couple of things, and there's probably a couple that I don't know about. But some states have specific rules, and I don't remember which ones, but have specific rules about when a credit can be earned. A few require that certain math credits, for instance, must be taken during the high school years, even if you had to repeat them. In other words, I took it in 7th grade, but to get the high school credit, I got to take Algebra 1 again. Now, that's a stupid rule if you ask me, but there's some stupid rules out there, right? But some of you may be in a state, some of you may have cover schools that have these kind of requirements. You probably already know that the cover school or the state that you were in has extra restrictive requirements. So, that information is probably already out there and you probably already know it. Another case that you may find some special stuff is NCAA or some kind of athletics. If the student will be an NCAA athlete, the eligibility rules are a little strict. And so you need to look in if that's where you're heading, if that's kind of what you're thinking, if that's a possibility, you want to document it clearly. And if you've documented it wrong, you can probably go back and say, okay, I need to change this and put the credits in the right place to make them. Now, we're not lying about credits. We're just, how do you represent the story? What's really happened here? When did they take what? And you might find yourself in the same situation where they've got to retake a course to fit that guidelines of the NCAA. You will, and of course, you will always find a few selective colleges. Now, this is very rare, but and I don't mean selective. Well, just sometimes these are even small schools. They actually want to see a timeline of when things are done. And so usually when you see that is you've got a school, a university, or actually a program inside of a university, like a degree program, and they might have specific requirements that they want you to meet. And as you start experimenting, as you start exploring where your student might not be going to college, then you uncover these kind of issues. And so the sooner you know and you can kind of start exploring, the better. But I don't know of any normal state college or large name university that does something like that. Most of them are fairly straightforward. And even the big name ones that you think are difficult to get in, they're straightforward. They got other requirements, but they're not usually sticklers for these kind of details. In practice for homeschoolers, though, if we just kind of step back and say in practice, it's very common. Actually, let me just take that away. Private school, public schools, you will find it very common for people to be taking Algebra 1 in earlier grades. I think I was taking Algebra 1, and I was at a public school system that was not known for anything quality. And I think we took Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, if I remember. And so you'll find that that's very consistent. That's not unusual, and I'm pretty sure I had Algebra 1 going into college. I have no idea, So some examples and templates. So I'm not going to cover them here, but if you look there's a video to show you exactly how this is done, the transcript layout, and you can actually download, if you look at our How to Build a Homeschool or High School transcript, trying to get the title right. If you look at the link down below, they'll show you how to do that. We'll show you a video of doing that. You can download the tools to do them yourself if you want to use those also. So if you are planning on 7th and 8th grade math, if this is something that you're kind of doing, is you might check out also the video link. Says, what should my 7th grader take? And usually we get that question, and of course for us usually that's about math or science. And number 2 is how to know if your teen is really ready, because that's the other issue, is when we start doing this, are you ready to take the Algebra 1 when you've come out of 1st through 6th grade math. So again, there's some links down there that will help you, that will further on this conversation and give you some of the other details that we've been talking about. Hopefully this helps. Always, feel free to email us at support@askdrcallahan.com. Thanks a lot.